So who else is very concerned about how much battery power is left on their Apple Watch? I bet you didn't know that Apple has 5 recommendations to help your little wrist computer last a bit longer. I've tested all 5 to see which ones are actually useful, and after spending way too many months testing my watches, I figured out how to make my Apple Watches last from 1.5 to 2 times as long. But what else did we discover, Monty? Only 3 out of the 5 recommendations actually work. Now the first recommendation is a bit convoluted. Apple says during running and walking workouts, turn on power saving mode to disable the heart rate sensor. Now what's the first thing that came to mind when you heard that? Has to be low power mode, right? Let's get into it. First of all, if you follow Apple's instructions, you'll find out that, well, power saving mode doesn't exist anymore. It was called power saving mode with older watchOS versions, but now it's just called low power mode. This recommendation basically turns on low power mode on your watch when you work out. The moment you stop working out, low power mode comes off. Now, despite saying it disables a heart rate sensor, my heart rate sensor still goes on with this setting. Now, if you're a proud owner of one of the newer Apple Watches, like the Series 8, Apple Watch Ultra, or the Apple Watch SE, there's an addition option where you can reduce GPS and heart rate readings while walking and running as well. So that saves you a bit more battery power. The Series 7 and older do not have that. So once I had that all figured out, I measured the battery percentages over 2-hour-long workouts, and the average baseline for the Series 7 and Series 8 was 11.9 and 10.5%. Now with the pseudo power saving mode turned on, the average battery consumed was 10% and 8.1% for the Series 7 and 8. So 2% savings over 2 hours. And you know what? That kind of makes sense because you are turning on low power mode, but it's 2% over 2 hours. How about the Apple Watch Ultra? I couldn't get a reliable reading off of the battery percentage because a lot of the times it would just sit at the same percentage. On to the second recommendation, which is to use a Bluetooth heart rate monitor to help you conserve battery power. Sounds like an easy test, right? So I paired Bluetooth heart rate monitors for Garmin and Polar and did the same number of 2-hour-long test cycles. Now the assumption is that because you're using these heart rate monitors, the Apple Watch isn't using the built-in heart rate sensor, so it should save some power, right? Well, the average battery consumed by the Series 7 and 8 with the Bluetooth heart rate monitors ended up being 14% and 11.8%, which is higher than the Apple Watch using its own heart rate sensor. Wow. Just wow. Now here's the thing, this isn't the first time Bluetooth on my Apple Watch has messed everything up. Keep watching. Now the third recommendation deals with your wrists. Apple says to turn off wrist raise off to minimize how much the screen lights up. But let's not get too far ahead of ourselves because the question that I personally had when I saw this was, how much power are we going to save with devices that have an always on screen? So here's what I did. I recorded the battery levels on 12-hour intervals with wrist raise on and wrist raise off, and the average battery drain with wrist raise off on my Apple Watch Ultra was 36.6%, which is lower than the 38.5% average baseline. So it's lower, but almost within the margins of error. Honestly, guys, turning wrist raise off wasn't annoying to me, especially with the always on screen, because you can still see the screen and you can still push your complications. If you're in really bright sunlight, you could just tap the screen and the screen would come on and you can still see it again. So from my perspective, this is probably the only thing I could leave off almost indefinitely. Now, as a side note, the comparison for these 12-hour interviews were based on times captured during the day. The battery drain on my Apple Watch Ultra during the 12 hours that included 6 and 7 hours of sleep, those averaged out to be around 20%. So there's a difference between data power consumption and nighttime power consumption. That logically makes sense. Now I took this recommendation one step further. Apple doesn't say it on their support page, but the last test I did with this recommendation was to turn wrist raise off and always on off. And having both those options turned off resulted in a daily burn of 18.5%. That is quite significant. But how much battery power would you save with older devices like the Apple Watch Series 3? Now your mileage will vary with this, but for my tests, I went with 8-hour intervals, and with wrist raise off, the battery drain was on average 16%. With wrist raise on, the average was about 48%. So if you're running an older device, do that to save a ton of battery power. Friendly reminder, if this is the first time you're watching one of my videos, make sure you hit subscribe. I do a lot of product reviews as well, and this entire channel is unsponsored. I don't get paid by external companies other than YouTube to do these videos. So any sort of support, whether it be sharing, giving a like, leaving a comment down there, will be a great help to keep this channel the way it is. Now the fourth suggestion that Apple makes is not to turn off Bluetooth on your phone. Now this recommendation was kind of confusing to me. Just seemed a little backwards. It seems backwards because Bluetooth consumes power. I mean, it's sold to us as being very power efficient, but it still takes power. Now on the other hand, it makes sense because the Apple Watch relies heavily on the iPhone for almost everything. The Apple Watch by itself without a cell connection is, from my perspective, borderline useless. So by turning Bluetooth off your device, your Apple Watch is just basically going to be like, what am I doing? What am I doing? And by doing that, it's going to consume more power. Now to test this recommendation, I did two things. The first was toggling the Bluetooth symbol on and off in the command center and measuring the battery drain during 12-hour intervals. And I'll be honest with you, I really wasn't ready for the results. The battery drain for the Series 8 on average was 45.9% with Bluetooth on, but when Bluetooth was turned off, the battery drain was 37%. Ah, so that's the exact opposite of what Apple said was going to happen, right? But wait, there's more. I did the same test with my Apple Watch Ultra, and on 12-hour interviews, guess what? The battery drain was only 21% with it toggled off, and with it on, well, as I mentioned before, it was 38.5%. Now I know some of you hawk-eyed Apple fans are in the comment section being like, it doesn't do anything when you do the Bluetooth thing in the command center. And you're right. Toggling Bluetooth there only turns off Bluetooth connections for like non-Apple products, basically. Apple, you scoundrel. So basically that toggle shouldn't have an effect on Apple Watch battery life, but here we are. That's what I've observed. Has anybody else noticed that? So what happens if you turn off Bluetooth actually in the settings? On average with my Series 8, it consumed the same amount of power. It was 46% on average. So yeah, I really don't know what to think about this recommendation. So I guess technology is just a very mysterious thing. Sometimes it just doesn't make sense. Magical! Did I do it for the Apple Watch Ultra? I didn't. I kind of forgot about it because I was doing low power mode testing for it. Now the easiest way to save battery power is just to turn on low power mode. You'll basically hamstring your Apple Watches. You'll lose basically anything related to heart and blood, and you'll lose the always on screen and other things related to wireless connections, but you'll definitely make your Apple Watch last much longer. By how much? Holy crap, so much. So from before, the average burn on my Apple Watch Ultra was about 38.5%. With low power mode turned on, it ended up being 13.2%. So during the day, I was able to save 66% of my battery. But it comes at a cost because you really don't get to use your Apple Watch. During the nighttime on average, I think it was about 20%, and then with low power mode, it was 10%. So not as high of a savings, but still pretty significant, 50%. Going low power mode is the most effective way to save power on your Apple Watch. So let's do a recap, Monty. Using low power mode during workouts doesn't really work. It will only save you a minuscule amount of battery power at the cost of having kind of no heart rate readings for certain types of workouts. Strapping on a Bluetooth heart rate monitor instead of using the built-in Apple Watch one uses more battery power, so this recommendation is terrible. Turning off always on and or wrist raise off will net you some really decent savings without hamstring your Apple Watch's functionality too much. That to me is the best recommendation I can give you guys in order to make your Apple Watches last longer. With the Apple Watch Ultra, I'll add another day. With the Series 8, I maybe get an extra third of a day. The recommendation to keep Bluetooth on, well, this one is just kind of everywhere. The jury for me is still kind of out because I don't know. Everything just seems so off about this recommendation, but if you want to take a chance, turning off Bluetooth connections in the command center seem to help with Apple Watch battery life. And the last one is low power mode, and that is the nuclear option, and it does work really well. It will save you the most power, but it also hamstrings the Apple Watch the most. I would only use low power mode if all I needed to know was the time and nothing else. So like on a long flight, or if you have to spend time with your kids. So that's all I got for this video. Questions, comments, leave them down below. If you think I should try to do all of Apple's recommendations or other creators' recommendations for the iPhones, well, let me know and I'll see what I can do. That might take 6 months. Thanks for watching.